Welcome to this episode of Locked In. In this episode, I'm going to show you my bike restoration of my 1994 US-made steel Trek single track. I found a really good deal on a bike that came into the shop that I work at, and I ended up buying it off the customer. It's a super clean example of a vintage US-made 26-inch rim brake touring mountain bike that I wanted to restore and bring back to life with some parts I had laying around. So if that's something you want to see, please stay tuned. So in this episode, basically, I'm going to be showing you when I picked up this bike. As you're seeing right now on the screen, this is how I picked up this bike. A really great condition, clean frame, and I haven't seen something this old and this clean in such a long time. And then when you study the details, you can see the lug work, the US made sticker on there, and this thing's made out of true temper steel, which I believe is no longer around anymore. So a really rare, clean example of something that I wanted to just bring back to life with some parts that actually had donated to me from a customer when we did a 1x12 conversion. They had an old Dior XT 10-speed 2x setup on their bike that they just gave me because they didn't need it anymore, and I was like, you know what, I want to keep this bike kind of OEM plus, and if you look at the original components on it, they were old Dior XT, so I was keeping it in the Shimano family and actually just a like-for-like spec, but we went from a 7 to a 10 speed. So as you can see in this montage here, basically what I did is I stripped down all the components, and the first thing that I wanted to do was to see if I could get a 10-speed cassette on the rear wheel, and lo and behold, it was a freewheel style hub body, so I was able to put the 10-speed cassette on there, which is an 11 to 36. So then I basically stripped everything, and I wanted to go originally 2x, as you can see in this footage here, but unfortunately because of the cage design, because I wanted to keep the OEM front derailleur, bringing it down to the 2x chainring size that it had on there, it ended up not working, and it would slam into the frame when it would go into the smaller of the two chain rings. So I ended up saying, you know what, screw it. I had an extra 1x narrow wide chainring laying around, so I slapped that on the crankset. Now, yes, the crankset for the eagle-eyed among you is not a Shimano unit. It is a SRAM unit that I ended up just scuffing and painting black to clean up the aesthetic. In a perfect world, I would probably run a silver Dior XT crankset, but this works for now and goes with the overall aesthetic, I think, pretty well. Once I got everything on there, I swapped over some levers that I had laying around because the original shifter pods, as you can see in this footage, actually were integrated into the brake lever. So I had some extra Tektro levers from my flat bar gravel bike build. You can watch that series in the links below. And basically just swapped everything out, utilizing some of the original cables on the bike because they looked like they had been changed recently, and swapping out a few new ones if I needed. And then I wanted to swap the old surface tires on there. They were a slick tire, so I ended up swapping the tires out as well, going up to a 2.2 Maxxis Icon. I probably could sneak in a little bit bigger even, but I wanted something that was light duty tread if I want to take this thing on the dirt, but realistically it's probably going to be a street cruiser, but I just like the look of the beefier tires on this build. Now, I thought about going to a other stem and handlebar setup, but I couldn't get rid of the go fast handlebars. I thought that was really funny, and so I wanted to keep those on there. And then I did swap out the saddle for a Bontrager saddle, again keeping it OEM plus with their commuter saddle. And then I found a Bontrager orange cage that matches the logos perfectly. I don't know if this is just a Trek orange they've been using over the years, but it's seriously just 10 out of 10. And that's it. Check out how this thing came out. Super, super clean. Again, an OEM plus build. I wanted something that's kind of the bike build restoration for people who love bikes. What does that mean? That means when you're looking at this thing, if you just kind of walk by it, it looks like an old steel mountain bike, like you wouldn't really pay any attention to it. But if you're an avid cyclist or a lover of builds, this would be something that would kind of catch your eye, and maybe you'd give it a second look to check it out that, man, this thing's got a modern drivetrain on it. It's been slightly restored, but keeping to the kind of original vibes of these older mountain bikes. So I'm really, really stoked with this build. I loved how it came out. I've been kind of putting it around and using it as my errand bike. Something that, again, rides super well with the steel frame and the modern components. This thing shifts like a dream, and it's something that is reliable. I can lock up somewhere and not be super worried about it. Obviously, I don't want it stolen, but it's something that, again, to somebody who doesn't know anything, it just looks like an old steel bike. It doesn't look brand new, so hopefully it detracts from thieves wanting to try to cut my locks that are on it. So let me know in the comments below, do you have an old steel frame that you've revitalized? Link me to pictures or videos if you have them on YouTube or Instagram. I'd love to see them. Follow me on Instagram as well if you're interested in this build. I may or may not be selling it. I'd love to keep it. I just don't have the room for all the builds that I currently have, so I'm considering selling this. So DM me on Instagram if you're interested. I'd be willing to ship it out, obviously via buyer's expense. So if that's something, if I find other builds, I definitely love doing this and kind of upcycling some recycled parts that would probably end up in the trash if somebody didn't want to take the time to sell them on OfferUp Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, or whatever. So upcycling this build, I think it turned out great. It just brought that vintage bike up just a notch, and trust me, this thing's still kind of funky to ride around with the older geometry, but I made it work, and that's why the kind of setup on it looks kind of crazy, but it actually is really comfortable. And I do enjoy it for the short 30-minute to hour rides that I tend to take it on, and I couldn't be happier with the outcome. So that's it for this episode. Make sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I posted about this bike months ago, so you would have seen it first before it hit the channel. So make sure to follow me on there, as well as if you want to pick up a Slow But Look Pro t-shirt, links in the description below. It helps support the channel so I can do more cool builds like this. And lastly, thanks for watching this episode of Locked In.
Let's get locked in.